Welcome back, everyone, to the last stand up of 2023. Then we're going to put it behind us and we're never going to talk about the toolkit again. No, I'm kidding. We're going to continue next year, obviously. Um, hey, gang, Brandon, how you doing?
Hey, Gerald.
Hey,
so
up.
I'm getting over a cold, so I'll probably be muted as much as I can today to avoid coughing. I've got my box of tissues here, but I made it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. You made it. You're here. Dedication. Sean, I just heard from someone in the chat, our biggest fan, George, that it's raining in the UK. Just as Brandon was mentioning, it's raining in California because we're all over the place. I'm in the Netherlands, but Sean, yep, yeah, I can hear the rain. Are you okay?
It is pretty miserable. I went out for a run this morning and regretted it instantly. But I'm nice and dry now, so it's all good. It's also
Good.
National Christmas Jumper Day today, so hopeful that
I
people
did
have.
not get that memo. Um, yeah, so actually, like, there's always, I think, each year for a couple of years now, where Microsoft has this like ugly Christmas sweaters, which are themed in like I don't know Windows XP and Windows 95, and um, they're they're kind of cool, but you also can't get them outside of the US, so that kind of sucks. And they're sold out like really, really soon. But anyway, as a side note, Tanya, how have you been?
Hello everyone, it was fine for me.
Good, good, great, great, great. Cliff, you already got told off in the chat. You're filling everyone's inboxes because you have been busy closing all kinds of discussions, and we're getting all
Yep.
kinds of notifications. What are you doing?
I'm just cleaning up, like we said.
All right, perfect,
So,
perfect.
that's what we said we'd do. So I'm just cleaning up discussions. I'm now working on the MAUI.markup one and closing all the ones that are closed off there as well.
I'll subscribe right now. Unsubscribe, sorry.
Yeah.
So that I don't get the notifications. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Like we're cleaning up all the discussions. We're, trying to put a little structure in there as well. So closing all those off that we don't need anymore that we've decided upon. And we can start with a clean slate for 2024. Speaking of a clean slate, Vladislav, how are you doing?
Yeah, hello. As for today, mostly cleaning my mailbox after cleaning discussions.
Yeah. See?
Yeah, yeah. But overall, just have a final preparation for the .NET Conference 2023, which I'm organizing this year in Ukraine. So it
Oh,
will happen
cool.
very soon. Yeah,
That's
final
great. When is
preparations.
that?
What? Sorry?
When is that?
It will be publicly available at 21st or 23rd
Okay.
of December. Yeah,
Perfect.
available
Awesome.
on YouTube. Yeah, I will
Great.
share the link definitely.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Share that so we can share it with the rest of the world. But we're here to talk about the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit, a little bit about the markup stuff as well, of course, which is part of the amazing Community Toolkit as well. Hello, Carl. Good to see you all. Good to see you too. We have, as always, since we're doing that since a while, since somewhere this year, we have all of our notes, and I'm pointing this way because it's here for me, publicly on the repository as well. And Brandon is going to paste the link in the chat for you right now, so you can follow along, and it's on screen right here, actually. So you can see and follow along with all the links that we're going to talk about. We were just discussing, like, just before we went live here, like, do we have any announcements? I don't think we have anything right now for you. We were kind of discussing like our tradition of releasing on Fridays. We got a couple of bug fixes already, so maybe we're gonna go wild and do the last release maybe of this year because people will be probably out for the holidays as well. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow, or at least see if we have a couple of things that we can squeeze in there for the next release and do something soon. But yeah, I think we can do like one more release for this year with the latest bug fixes and stuff for you to use so that you have a smooth ride and you can maybe tinker some over the holidays. Maybe you're like, ugh, I don't like fun stuff with family. Ugh, I can get that. Like I'm gonna hack away on my little project, and we give you all the tools to do that. um all right, so we do got a couple of proposals, and Sean, I see your name next to the first one right here. Enhance pop-up service to provide a set of close methods, because you introduced, well, we all did. We're a team, but you came up with the brilliant idea to come up with a pop-up service so that you can easily use it with MVVM scenarios, that kind of stuff. And now we've merged that, and apparently there is a need for close methods.
Yes, yeah. To prevent having a massive PR, we went with the initial subset of functionality. So we now have the ability to show pop-ups from a view model, which is quite nice. But you don't have the ability to close them from the view model. So that would be the next follow-up. I think we'd all agree that we want it. It's more a question of how we're going to expose it and what we want to expose to people. And I think there has been a discussion going on as to what we think we might like. And then it's kind of working out whether we want to agree on a piece of functionality, whether we want to go off and play around with some things and work out what fits. For example, I played with it this week to get an idea as to whether we could use like the old approach to the navigation, iNavigation used to do with Xamarin Forms, and that's treat them in a stack, in the fact that I think in the majority of scenarios, if you show a pop-up and you want to show another one, then technically it's on top of the other one. You either, because you've got to tap outside to dismiss, or you can't tap outside to dismiss, and therefore you can't tap on the pop-up that's below. So a stack might be a decent way of treating them in that regard. And then you can literally just say, we'll close the current pop-up, and then keep popping them off the stack until you've completed that. There is a scenario where that might not fit with if maybe we have multi-window support, but then I suspect we might want to change to maybe scoping the pop-up service anyway, and then the stack would probably still work there. But I wanted to see what people think with regards to, I guess, close in general, and then whether anyone had any strong opinions on how we might want to expose that to people.
Thanks, Sean. I'll try to be quick so I can mute myself again. But no, I think the close method makes a lot of sense. If anything, it probably would have probably should have been in the first release. I definitely didn't think about it, but yeah, I think we could get it all done without a stack. One of my concerns is keeping track of that in pop-up service, because I could always new up a pop-up and say show async directly from the content page and not necessarily use the service, but then maybe somewhere else in my app use the pop-up service. And so I think kind of the way we got it, where when you say close pop-up, if you pass in the pop-up, and I spelled pop-up wrong. Is that what you were calling me out on, Gerald? Yeah, I think if we just have them pass in the pop-up or the type of pop-up or something like that, where we don't have to necessarily maintain a stack, just because I can see that getting messy.
Yeah, from my point of view, if we pass a pop-up, yeah, generally how I expect this service can be used. So how I actually use the pop-up service, I use it mostly in model in view model, and inject this pop-up service. So generally, view model shouldn't know anything about the view where it's used, and somehow we need to pass a reference to pop-up, which is actually a UI element. And it would be nice if actually, if not like to correctly use a MVVM pattern, we shouldn't like pass the view elements inside of view model. And also, from my point of view, pop-up service should be similar to current .NET MAUI Windows API, where like pop-up is general the same, almost the same as a window, if we say it. So it just we display pop-up. We have some stacks of windows or array of windows. We can close this window, and that's how I see it. It can work. Probably should be similar API as .NET MAUI has for Windows.
Why not both? Can we have also another method with like pop or something, or pop to root, like we have that for the navigation for .NET MAUI as well, where you can actually use kind of like that stack, and you can have the close one to do a specific one if you want. I don't know. Maybe that's too much, but
yeah. But yeah, in that case, if we have like a stack, probably we cannot like jump through the. So if you open Popup, that opens Popup, that opens Popup, you cannot like if you close one like parent Popup, it should close all children probably
Right.
as well. So yeah, we just need to make sure that it's possible or not.
I'm not sure if that's something that you want to support, maybe, but
Or also, maybe we're just overthinking it, and I would say not
it
that you
simple.
can't put pop-ups on top of pop-ups, but how many people do that? Like, are we thinking too hard on an edge case here, where maybe we just make the assumption that you're only going to show one pop-up at a time, and yes, you can, and maybe we'll deal with that later, but I don't think we ever had in mind that we would have pop-ups on top of pop-ups. And is that really best practice for UI? I don't know. So I would even say it's probably safe for us to just ignore that scenario and say like, oh yeah, you can get into that scenario, but you're gonna have a messy time getting yourself out of it because we don't support it yet.
I agree as well. And if you want to re-show a pop-up, you just re-show it. So, allow one pop-up, and if they wish to re-show one they had before, then they need, it's on the developer then to manage that and show it themselves, so they can create a stack in memory and do it their way that makes sense to them, as opposed to us trying to figure out, as you say, an edge case, which how many people eventually are going to use? Probably, one or two developers. I don't think it's going to be that called for in my mind.
I'm all for shipping with like an MVP, minimum amount of functionality, and then we can always expand upon that later. That's not a bad approach. So what we just effectively keep track of the current showed one, displayed one, or allow them to pass in the view model that they would close. I don't know.
It's a good question. So I don't disagree with Vlad. Like Vlad mentioned, you shouldn't put your view logic or your view code in your view model. But I can also see people, like, I think you can use pop-up service from anywhere. So I certainly see passing in a pop-up being valid. But yeah, or you know what? I mean, what we could do, I kind of threw it out down here as like maybe a next release, but maybe this is the release, is we just have close all pop-ups and close all pop-ups async, and then covers all our bases.
Just a question: does our open Popup method return the reference to Popup?
No. So
In that case, how we can pass something in Popup in close Popup?
I think in the discussion somewhere, Brandon may have mentioned having an out parameter, so we could pass the pop-up out. That may have been in Discord rather than here.
Oh yeah,
it's
we were just
difficult
chatting
to
about
remember.
that.
Yeah. So there could be a way. The bit that I like possibly the least about passing in the pop-up is it isn't symmetrical with the show, because the show we pass in the knowledge of the view model that's linked to the pop-up.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, because currently this like method where we pass a pop-up inside of close method, it will be just a method that will call popup.close, and that's it. So what stops user from just calling popup close where they need, why they need to use additional layer of popup service? So yeah, it makes sense if it happens under the hood and understand what pop-up it needs to be closed. So probably it doesn't make a lot of sense just to call create additional layer just to close pop-up if we actually pass a reference for that pop-up that we want to close.
Yeah, I get your point there. Yeah, if we return the out of the pop-up, rather than calling pop-up service.close, you could just call pop-up.close. Or pop-up service.close passing in the pop-up. You could just call pop-up.close.
Well, I'd say, if nothing else, everybody out there watching, listening, thanks for joining us. But let us know what you think. Like, how are you using the pop-up service? What would you expect the API to look like? You know, that's why we have these proposals. That's why we have these discussions. You know, it doesn't have to just be us guessing at how everybody's using it, so that we can help you out. So certainly, yeah, if you think just a close method's good enough and you can pass in a pop-up, or if you don't even think you need it, that's cool too, because that'll certainly save Sean some time.
Out of interest though, can you do it in the native OS? You can't do it in Android. I don't think you can't have a pop-up on top of a pop-up. So if the native OS doesn't support it, are we kind of now developing things that are beyond what the OS does? And isn't that kind of not the general idea of kind of Xamarin stroke MAUI?
No, I
We're missing something here.
I think we've certainly not prevented the functionality, so I think people could do it. I certainly don't think it's a recommended way of doing it. I think, as Brandon mentioned, having pop-ups on top of pop-ups is most likely going to be a bad user experience, unless there's some odd edge case that we haven't considered. I know actually a bug report came up the other day where someone was using a pop-up to create their own context menu in an app. That might lead to potentially multiple pop-ups, but it scares me, especially if you're doing it inside of a mobile app, which is not the sole purpose of MAUI, but is still a kind of a predominant target.
Okay. Yeah. So still some discussions here, I guess. Put some thoughts in, people.
I mean, I have played around with some bits. I haven't pushed them up, but I've got a branch that does the stack pasting, and the code isn't that complex, but I can't guarantee I've covered all edge cases. I don't mind pushing it up and see what people think. We could swap from stack to something like a list, and we could then potentially manage it ourselves.
Absolutely.
In terms of
So
working out.
I guess that would be great. Like at least maybe some draft PR or something as well. Like you know, you can download the NuGets from that. People can play around with it. Even we can play around with it and see how that goes. And then maybe we'll see to make that part of a last release. Who knows? Things might move quickly sometimes. Okay, I think we've talked. Oh, Brandon, were you going to say something?
I just want to say probably we can, for simplicity and for better understanding how pop-up service can be used, it can be probably renamed to pop-up stack. And in that case, we can have two methods like push and pop, and it will be clear what actually happened. Like we pushed pop-up, we displayed it, we pop-up, then it's just removed from that stack. It will be pretty clear for us and probably for people what actually happens there, and we can pass. In that case, we don't even need to pass any reference because we already know what the number of opens pop-ups. We can have reference to all open pop-ups. Yeah, but once again, it's a breaking change, and
and I was gonna say similar breaking change. There is one route we could go where, and be massive breaking change, but basically remove those action methods from the pop-up class, or from iPopup to be more specific. So iPopup couldn't call, close, and show anymore. We would defer everything to the pop-up service, because then the pop-up service could have the stack in it and keep track of everything. Whereas my concern with the service having the stack is that I could still just new up and show a pop-up without the service. And then the service doesn't know about it, and I say service.pop or whatever the case is, and then next thing you know, I'm opening up a bug on the community toolkit because technically I'm using it wrong, but also we have those extra paths. So just food for thought. I wouldn't say that's how we should do it in the first one, but there is a world I could see where we just kind of push everybody towards pop-up service for using pop-ups.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Cool. All right. Next one is a fun one too. Port Android Media Element from Exoplayer to Media 3. Now, I know Brandon's name is here, but I'll help him out a little bit. We discovered the other day that, well, it's probably been around a little while already that all the Exoplayer stuff is suddenly obsolete. So all of our code was like screaming at us, like, "Oh, everything is obsolete. You should do other things," which is apparently Media 3, and that's kind of interesting because the Martijn, he is a Dutch person from. Baseflow is what his company is called. Martijn has been a long time Xamarin veteran, doing lots of stuff with Xamarin. I think he moved on to other projects right now, but he's still maintaining bindings for at least like the Exoplayer and some other fine projects as well. So we could use that, his wonderful work, which is great. But now the question is kind of like, okay, Media 3, there's not really bindings for it yet. So is Martijn going to create that? I just peeked at the issue right here. Brandon has already been talking to him. So I think he has plans for it, maybe. You can maybe elaborate on that. Another route that we could take is when I noticed this, I reached out to someone internally at Microsoft who kind of like does a bunch of these Android bindings and asked like, hey, do we have any plans to make bindings for that? I know he is working on that as well, which is really great. So we kind of like to have two options here. You talked to Martijn, Brandon. What was the status there?
Yeah. Let's see. I think. Yep. Added it here. So yeah, spoke with him, and he said he plans to look into it. But like you said, he doesn't get paid by anybody to make these. He does it because he loves doing it. So there's not necessarily a schedule with a guarantee that we're gonna get this by the end of January. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, right? Like Google just deprecated Exoplayer out from underneath every Android developer. So it's not just us in the toolkit or just us in MAUI dealing with this. Every Android developer has to port to Media 3. But yeah, step one, like you mentioned, is we need those. We need that library to have bindings. So yeah, I don't know if who you're talking to internally, if is Majenko.
This one. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah. So he mentioned down here that he had been looking into it, and he said it should not be too long. But also, I'm going to assume that's not his day job, is to make this and maintain it. So we're looking for some love from the community. If anybody out there wants to make us a Media 3 library, we will add it to the toolkit and we will port this code over. Until then, we're kind of just stuck. So I created this proposal because we know about it, we're aware of it, but we're just blocked.
Yeah, because so like if we take a step back a little bit, then there's like two layers here, right? Like first we need the bindings for Media 3 because Media 3 is going to be written in like Java or something like that, which is just going to be Android native. So we need bindings for that to be able to use them in like C# and .NET, right? That's how it works. So you're now on the Android layer. And then what we do with the .NET Community Toolkit, .NET MAUI Community Toolkit, is like make that even easier for you to use by pouring that into a control, which is called the media element. And, so you just have that one control, and then you don't have to care about what lives underneath that. But, we were now in the fortunate position to leverage the Exoplayer bindings from Martijn, which was really great. But if we also have to now maintain our Media 3 bindings, that is going to be like a whole new set of functionality that I'm not sure if we as a team want to maintain that, because it's like a big API service that you're taking in there. Hopefully it will mean that we get full screen functionality for Android. I don't know, who knows? But hopefully the APIs will be a little bit easier to use, although the Exoplayer wasn't that bad. But there can always be improvements. But ongoing, if you have any ideas around this, we're definitely happy to hear them. Otherwise, keep your eyes on the proposal.
Yeah, and the good news is that nobody should be blocked. Like Media Element still works. Google marked it as obsolete, but they haven't broken anything with it yet. So everything's still fine for now. We're planning ahead a little bit because eventually they will officially kill it, and then we'll need a solution. But usually, like, because I forget what was before Exoplayer, because I think XPlayer is either the second or third media library that Google's had in this saga. And
Just like camera 1, 2, and 3, and all
yeah. And yeah, it took Google a while to kill off the previous media service, whatever it's called, before XPlayer. So I'll bet we have a couple years to figure this out, hopefully. I'll say we'll probably have at least 1 year, if not 2.
Yeah, I think like what Google does a lot is like obsolete a bunch of stuff, but never really take it out. At least in like their main Android OS stuff. I think there's a bunch of like obsolete stuff also in .NET MAUI, which we were still able to use. So, at some point you're probably going to break, but we probably have a good while for this to really kind of break. So, all right. Keep your eye on that proposal. Let us know if you have any input. That's great. Add support for native IoT. Brandon, that sounds fancy.
Yeah, native AOT. So if there's any longtime Xamarin MAUI developers out there, you've probably been aware of ahead of time compilation. The Mono runtime has used it forever for iOS because on iOS, you can't have any code generated at runtime. So Apple made this rule. So Mono has always had AOT, which is ahead of time compiling, which is great. And fairly recently, like within the last couple of years, the .NET team, the .NET runtime, .NET Core, whatever you want to call them, they've added in what they are calling native AOT, native ahead of time compiling, for what we call .NET 8 nowadays. So under the hood, MAUI still uses the Mono runtime for some things, but it looks like in .NET 9, MAUI will have native AOT support. And so that means we're going to have to add it too. So this is, again, just another kind of a long proposal that we've got about a year, or I guess maybe 6 months, whenever the first .NET 9 release comes out. We'll want to have native AOT support. But essentially, what you want to do is go through your library and you add these steps like adding is AOT compatible true, enable trim analyzers, because there's also this thing called the trimmer, which longtime Xamarin MAUI developers are probably familiar with the linker. The trimmer is the same thing. It's just the linker is for Mono, the trimmer is for .NET, like .NET 8 .NET. And it just removes code that it doesn't think you're using. So, for example, if you're using the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit and you're only using one converter, well, there's no reason for the compiler to include all of the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit code into your DLL file, into your library. So it'll trim that out. But what we've got to do as library owners, maintainers, is make sure that we're trimmer safe and AOT safe. So there's certain scenarios where we have to basically tell the compiler, like, don't remove this. You might think we're not using it, but because of the way, who knows, maybe it's the way bindings work, or maybe we're using dependency injection. And so there's kind of this weak reference to some code. When the trimmer looks at it, it might not see a strong reference. So it'll assume, oh, nobody's touching this class, so obviously we don't need it. But in reality, we are. So, this is something that, obviously, if anyone wants to jump in and take it, go for it. But I'm also excited about, so I'm happy to take on this challenge. But it's kind of one of those slogs, like when we added nullability back in the Xamarin Community Toolkit days. It's just like, when you turn on nullability and you're going to get a ton of warnings. So like when we turn on enable trim analyzer, we're going to get a ton of warnings, and it's going to be a little bit of whack-a-mole. We'll go through and figure out what we got to do to make our library more compatible. But this is more of just an FYI for the community to let you know that, yes, .NET 9 will have native AOT support as promised by the .NET MAUI engineering team. So we're going to add support for that too. And this also was brought up in a previous discussion. So I do want to give a shout out to who brought this up. There he is. So TramB3er, sorry, I don't know your real name off the top of my head, but he was the one that kind of brought it up like, hey, I'm getting this weird exception when I'm turning on the .NET trimmer. I'm like, oh, well, it's not trim safe yet. But now with .NET 9, we'll have to be. So, any Any volunteers for this? Like I said, I'm also happy to take ownership of this, and this is kind of like the low level stuff I like playing around with too.
Just a question: do we blocked by third-party libraries that we use, like Media Element 3? Is it if it's not native AOT compatible, will it block us from releasing and supporting native AOT in our library?
Oh, I didn't even think about that, Vlad. That's a good question. I don't know, but I imagine. So I've only played around with and looked at this a little bit. There's also blog posts. I should also mention this. If anybody out there is looking to do this for their library, Eric Erdhart published a blog post just a couple days ago that says how to make your libraries compatible. And I think there's attributes, Vlad, that we can add, like I don't know, maybe one of these attributes we can slap on and say, like, don't ever trim this library from our library. But I don't know. That's a really good point, and we'll have to make sure to double check on that when we're working on this.
Yeah, if we blocked, it will be like a problem. Also, if we're not able to fix all warnings, can be like a partially native AOT. So like some, like, for example, snack bar supports native AOT and it will work, but for example, like media element will be dependent on other code and it will not support. So if, for example, if user use snack bar, his library will work. If not, if other element, it will not work. So yeah, we have like open questions here.
Yes. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. This is something that, now that we're talking about it, I probably should start working on this next month so we can have it ready by the first preview of .NET 9.
And so it's just like, I remember we already, as you opened a PR, probably with a snack bar with .NET 8, we added some attributes. I don't remember exactly what it does, but we added some attribute in our CS approach file. Probably, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what it was about, but
yeah, we just basically said it's not trim safe. So
okay.
the
Not
way
really
we're able to
okay,
close the issue that I showed earlier was you can say, like, is trimmer, maybe it's in the directory build perhaps. But yeah, you can basically just say this library is not trim safe. So if somebody has the trimmer turned on, then they'll get a bunch of warnings saying, hey, just so you know, yeah, there we go, is trimmable false.
False, got it.
So that'll give them the compiler warning, which, because it was kind of our cheating way of closing that initial bug saying that the snack bar wasn't trim safe.
All right.
I
cool.
like George's comment, and I was going to suggest if you want some assistance and we can break it down into components, and we could be more than happy to contribute.
For sure. Yeah, I think the hardest part is just, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I have no idea what to expect when I turn on these analyzers that tell you where your code's unsafe. So yeah, I totally agree. If it can be broken down into chunks, and yeah, maybe we can do it by project, like, because we have community toolkit.maui, we have community toolkit.maui.core, we have community toolkit.maui.media element, maps. And so yeah, maybe we can chunk it up a little bit. But probably one thing we could do here, if everybody's on board, is we could vote to whether or not to approve it. I'm happy to assign myself as a champion on the fly, and then once it's approved, we don't have to wait for it to be approved. We can just kind of push forward with PRs.
I think it's a no-brainer. If we have to do it for .NET 9, then we kind of need to approve it. It's like a, yeah, we're in the chicken and egg situation, aren't we? I obviously approve it because we need to do it. So yeah.
Yeah. Anybody not approve this? Say, show of hands if we should not do this.
I think we kind of have to, right? Because
yeah, I think we have to. All right. Begrudgingly approved. Although it'll be fun. Like I said, this is something that every .NET library will encounter at some point. So as .NET developers, now that native AOT is becoming a thing and trimming is becoming a thing, you're going to run into this at some point. So you might as well dive into it now, follow along on our progress, learn from our headaches. And then, yeah, once we have PRs out there, you can essentially jump and see what we did in our PRs and leverage a lot of that code for your apps too.
Yeah, absolutely. That is great. Okay, so actually, the thing that you mentioned about maps that triggered me kind of a little bit. The maps package might be going away, which is good news. I'm not sure in what kind of like time frame that's going to happen, but I saw, I think in the Windows App SDK 1.5 roadmap that they're going to implement a maps control for WinUI, which should mean that, as the .NET MAUI team, we can now implement the Windows map on .NET MAUI directly. And yeah, we can get rid of like our kind of like workaround. Like, it's definitely stopgap, super handy if you need it for Windows. But I prefer to use the WinUI one if there was any. So, maybe we should put that in a proposal like, hey, we know it's coming. Maybe it's too early. I don't know. But that just popped in my head when you mentioned the map package right here. We have no issues anymore. So that's great. All the issues are gone.
They're all closed.
Just inbox 0. We can all go home. But luckily, we have Sean with his musings on showing pop-ups without having to subclass. Pop-up, how are we going to do that? That's impossible.
Yeah, I may have been a little bit naughty here and I
Ooh,
skipped the discussion and just started playing
Clickbait.
around.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it came up in a discussion when we originally announced the pop-up service, and someone said, "Well, can I show a pop-up without having to define the pop-up? Well, not necessarily define the pop-up, but define something that inherits from pop-up." If you like, I can share my screen. It might be a little bit easier to read from Visual Studio rather than
please.
a diff. This is when we find out I haven't set up any permissions, and therefore I have to.
I love how Macs do that nowadays. Like, oh, you're using the app and you want to share your screen for the first time? No, you got to close the app.
Okay. Can you all see this?
The text is very small, so I can't read it, but I can see it. Much better. Thank you.
Okay. I can't read it now. That's too big. So in the past, we've got the ability to add a transient pop-up that will do some magical registration with the dependency injection, the app builder, the services. But we have constraints on it to say, well, the pop-up needs to be of type pop-up. Rather than completely loosening that, I've gone with the approach at the moment of just having a second follow-up method that just lets you define pop-up content, and that is of type view rather than of type pop-up. Which then means you can define your pop-up that looks like this, so it's just a grid with a label. And then when you want to show it, I didn't open that one. Not completely prepared. Multiple pop-up. You can then, in theory, you can say, well, show me the pop-up. Again, you do it in the same way that you pass in the view model. You can tell it pass information across when you want to, when it gets shown, and therefore, if you view the app here, when you click show pop-up, it presents the grid with the label inside of it, rather than having to create anything that subclasses pop-up. Meaning you could, in theory, have a view that could be reused in the application as well as in the pop-up, which might present quite nicely if you want to provide some kind of animation of content popping up towards the user. So I was playing around with this, and I think we had an internal discussion about the concept. The issue comes with, if everyone likes it, how far we take it. You could expose more than I think we probably would want to, because obviously there are properties on the pop-up, things like whether you can dismiss it by tapping outside of it. I'd probably argue that is most likely the only thing that I think we should expose to the show method. So when you call show pop-up async, you could pass in whether you can dismiss it or not. I wouldn't go further than making it too customizable. But
I'll say I love the concept. Like, even to have like we've got got that method, just like popup.show async. Even having a static method like popup show async where you pass in, where it just accepts a view, it doesn't require a popup. I think it's a great idea because it does cut down a lot on the overhead of popup. I did always think it was strange, like if you want to just show something on the screen real quick that says like login successful, you have to go create your own pop-up control that inherits from pop-up, and if you want to use a service, then you got to add a view mount. So like there's a lot of ceremony there.
Yeah.
Whereas, I love the idea of just like, I just want a quick and dirty pop-up, or maybe I'm just debugging something and like, does this line of code hit? It'll show a pop-up. Like, so yeah, I'm totally in. And I would even say just, I don't know if we could expand it to the pop-up class, but
Okay, yeah.
that'd be cool too.
Yeah, I think the issue I have as well with the ceremony in creating one is there is no way to add a pop-up. So if you want to create your XAML, one of these, you have to add a content view, and then you have to know that you need to start changing the kind of the implementation that you're given. There's no file add new pop-up. I mean, we could possibly provide a template for that, but that comes into more extensions, doesn't it, rather than what you provide with the templates. Yeah. What does everyone else think? I can stop sharing now and see what people think.
Yeah, I like the idea that we can pass just any view to the pop-up service or pop-up method that will just display us content, and we also may add additional options parameter and pass all necessary options we need, like is dismissible, is something like background or whatever we need. Simply to what we have with the snack bar, we have like show message there can be content, and then we have like a bunch of options and where we customize the snack bar visualization. So we may have the similar view for pop-up. And furthermore, if we're going with this, we probably can also just remove pop-up view at all and just make it like a service. And pop-up will be like something like internal thing that we do not need to create it at all. So if we can pass it to the service, just a view, so with options. So we do not need, we probably can just remove all our handlers, all our like interface pop-up doesn't make sense probably after that. Yes, so all this stuff can be removed.
Yeah,
So
I mean, you make a good point there. It could be quite nice to effectively deprecate pop-up and push people through something that would probably cause less friction in the future. It will cause a fair bit of pain migrating on what people have currently done to the newer world, but we could do that in stages, not just pull the rug from under people. So we could deprecate pop-up and suggest, well, now just create your own. Basically, pretty much delete the outer tag and use whatever outer content control you've got, whether it's a grid or
if pop-up's still relatively new, it now might be the time to do that, because there isn't a kind of a large base of people and apps using the pop-up service as it currently is. So now might be the time to make that breaking change. And I quite like the fact that you can just pass it a view, because you can then have a view that is all your pop-ups going to look the same then.
So pop-up is not new. Pop-up service is new. Pop-ups have been around. I think that they got added fairly early on. So
yeah,
will be
that's
there.
what I mean. It's just that element of it is relatively new. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all for this new approach. So I have no issues with suggesting we move away from pop-up in terms of making developers inherit from it. We might want to do it in a stage process, though, of saying give them the pop-up service maybe with an option or maybe no options. And if they want to have full power, they can create their own pop-up and customize it with all the properties that they like. That puts less burden on us, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't slap the obsolete attribute on the pop-up class after implementing all this stuff, of course. And then whenever the next big .NET MAUI release comes out. So whatever is next a year from then, so whether it's .NET 9, .NET 10, then removing the pop-up class, because then we could also close all those pop-up bugs. Although it'd still be the same implementation under the hood, just different way of publicly accessing the APIs.
Deal with the new bugs that come in because we hold the rug from the people. Yeah, but I think so. The general consensus is people like the approach, so we could potentially keep playing with it, and then maybe see what we like in terms of settling on an API surface or something.
Cool.
Yeah, and even I could see even just popup service.show, and maybe even that's just a public static method, doesn't require a view model. I mean, I know that's getting to different breaking different things about how we recommend using pop-up service, but yeah, if we move to this world where there is no pop-up class that you have to implement and inherit from, then I could certainly see just give me a static method popup.show, and I'll pass in a view, and then I'm done.
Yeah. No, I know the pop-up service solves the MVVM approach. I'm all for potentially even just introducing the ability to just show a pop-up, like you say. Is some scenarios you don't even really need the view model, even if you are following MVVM. If you're just showing some UI, then what's the point of having a view model? So I would more than happily open up for the possibilities as well, make it easier to show things. Cool. Okay.
All right. Lots of good plans here. Looking at the time, we're almost out of time, and we still have we didn't have a big agenda today, so I thought we can stretch it a little bit, but now we're running out of time still. Vlad, expander in collection view. Oh no, yeah, expander collection view grid layout. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that?
Yeah, recently I found that we display expander in collection view, but collection view can be rendered, have two renders layout, like list view when you have a stack layout, and all items rendered one after another below, like we have on the first expander collection view here when we have Brandon and Gerald in the list. But we also .NET MAUI also allows to render them in a grid layout, where we have multiple columns like showed where we have like our pictures. So the problem still exists with the calculation. So probably let me also share my screen and show what happens there. So as for this issue, so it's our general expander where we display items one after another, and it's a grid layout. So how it works on Windows, not bad, I would say, but this is how it works on iOS application. So if I open our sample application and click on Brandon, you can see that all items rendered a bit weird. So they jump in, like they have different hits. If I click or click back, that some items are not backed, so what I expected. Also clicking on Pedro, it doesn't resize the collection view itself, and also it requires a lot of weird calculation from our side. If we're talking about expander window for Windows, we need to force update our cell size, finding where actually user clicked, depending on if it's a form list layout or forms grid view. So make some weird calculations, different logic for iterating through items in a row, because if we clicked on this item, we also need to update the size of each cell in this row and updating their size as well. So all items in row should be resized. The same happens for Mac, where we also need to update grid layout, finding the clicked cell, updating and iterating. So from one side, it's better than it was before, how it currently works in the current version, where we just render them like stairs. So like in this example, Brandon will be here, Gerald will be here, Jay will be there, and so on. So we have like stairs for rendering. But with current implementation, it's still not looks great, but it's better than before. So what should we do with it, like PR and this implementation? Should we going and continue and measure this PR, but or just keep it as it is and assuming that expander doesn't work great in collection view? Because for example, for for macOS, expander doesn't work in list view at all. We do not support it. For collection view, it's a bit better. Like I can click, you can see this icon and all items rendered correctly when we have a like stack layout. Yeah, but with a grid, grid layout, it's not as good as we can expect. But one thing, only on macOS. On Windows, it's a bit better. Looking at the screenshot, all items at least have the same size and text looks correct.
I mean, isn't gosh. So I remember collection view has something in it like allow different row heights or something like that. Do we need to honor that?
Yeah, as far as I know, in collection view there is a way to how each cell calculated, so it can measure only the first item and apply the size for all of them, or measure each cell and like measure all items strategy. So as wow, didn't know that from screen we can from photograph we can like just open some links. Cool. As for that, so it's still like because like expander actually updates the size and it should extend all cells in collection view. So each time we like expand or not extend the the view, each cell in collection view should be recalculated and re-rendered, and that is the main problem. So if we just render all items like assuming that expander is open, it will works correct. So all items will be calculated and size will for them will be correct. But just once we start like expanding and changing the size of each cell, we start and receive these rendering issues.
Man, I know we put a lot of work into get it working on collection view, but yeah, I noticed the latest version of either iOS or .NET MAUI or .NET 8 something broke that on the iOS side too, so it looks funny again, and I'm kind of wondering like, is it worth us continuing to chase all of this, or because I think right now we throw an exception at runtime if somebody tries to use it in a list view.
Yeah, in list view, right? Yeah, it doesn't support. We don't support expander in list view, but once again only on Apple. But because on Windows, list view works much better than collection view. On Android, everything works great. We do not need to change anything. We don't need like this weird measurement for each cell. So on Android, it works out of the box from .NET MAUI. So we do not need any additional code. Unfortunately, with Apple and with Windows, we need this additional layer of calculations to force update cell size with calculation for each platform, for each cell, and just make some offsets depending on the new hits of each cell after it's expanded.
Yeah, I guess my thought is, even if you've already, and it looks like you've already got the code ready, so if it's there, great. I think we can use it. But part of me also wonders like how deep do we go down this rabbit hole? Do we continue modifying expander just for these collection view cases. Just
Yeah, probably
thinking out loud.
From our side, probably, and I hope it will be the latest changes. So I do not expect that we should like continue like investigating how to make it better. And it would be nice if it will work just out of the box from .NET MAUI, like it works for Android. So we just like clicked and all items correctly like re-rendered. And so if like kind of this code go directly to directly go to the .NET MAUI code. But for now, at least just for correctly supporting like this rendering, in case somebody decided to use collection view with expander, so they at least have rendering at least like this. So probably not ideal, where they have a lot of space here between the cells, but it's better than if we have like if I scroll, if switch back, open, like this. So when it's not like rendered correctly for some reason. So yeah, my proposal just to match it as it is, even if it's not looks ideal, but yeah, and for the next issues, just to like it's need helps from community to finalize if they find a better solution for it.
I guess I'm kind of on the team for Brandon here. Like, I'm not sure like how many people actually want to use it this way. For this case, like we have it 90%, so it's probably makes sense to kind of like fix it. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't spend maybe too much time on all those edge cases. But yeah, good work anyways. Like, you're doing super cool things with all of this, so that's great. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're officially out of time, but I think, if people want to kind of like get out of here, I guess that's fine. Our time's up. But I guess we kind of like finish the rest of the agenda. So Cliff, try to keep it short, concise. Talking about a rating view plugin for MAUI. Yes or no? Do we need it? Do we want it? Why do we want it?
Well, the community wants it under the new idea we had of people kind of upvoting if they want something that's in the discussions. This has got the most votes, or the upvotes. So the community wants it. I think I've forgotten the name. Elzier, I think it is. Elzier has already done the work and has got a repo there. So I think they're just saying, would you like us to bring their repo in? So it looks a cool control. I like it. I upvoted it. I think it's kind of, I'd use it in my apps. So yeah, it's just whether we want to bring it in while we're here, and then one of us can champion. I don't mind championing it. So do we like it or not? Is the question. Vote in the chat if you want to. If you think it's.
I think it's definitely cool. But one of the things I go back and forth on is if a NuGet package already exists, which he's looks like he's published rating view control, so awesome. Yep. It's already out there. Do we need to add it to the .NET MAUI community toolkit? And I don't know the answer to that. Part of me leans towards no, just because it's going to be more work for us. But there's also the concept of, obviously he's opened this. We've had other people open up discussions about bringing in other people's libraries that they didn't own, and so that was kind of an easy no. Like, we're not going to just go steal somebody else's code. This is a little different because it's the owner saying we can add it in. So do we duplicate efforts and add it in? We could. Or if this is the case where he can't maintain it anymore, I would certainly see that as a strong impetus to bring it in. But yeah, I won't block you from bringing it in. Just wanted to share thoughts on, we've gotten other recommendations about like calendar controls and things like that. That somebody's already made this library and people want to add it to the toolkit, which I think is great. But if somebody already owns it and somebody wants to keep it as their own, that's also great too. So
yeah, I agree. There's already a NuGet there. Whether it's the fact that they want someone to take ownership and manage it, and they want it to be part of the package or not, but in the 2 weeks it's been a discussion, it's got 18 upvotes. It's the quickest any of our discussions have gotten. It's the most upvotes you've had on any discussion, including the calendar control. So the community clearly wants it. So it's for us to decide if we want to kind of not break the rule, because this is the person that's developed it saying,
right,
would you like to bring this in? A calendar control was everyone saying we should have a calendar control. Here's a good one, kind of thing. Go reinvent the wheel. This is them handing it to us. So obviously it needs a code review, and seeing if it fits in with the way and the style that the rest of the toolkit is written. But yeah, don't know.
Yeah, maybe Eliezer, I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Maybe you want to join the maintainer team. That'd be awesome. I think that would make it super easy for all of us, because we could fold you into the team, and then you would do the work adding it in. And then we'd also have you here. I think we're fortunate to have folks like George, who made George Lighthead, who did the avatar view for us. George still sticks around and fixes bugs and pull requests, but there's no obligation there that George does it. So thank you, George. But yeah, in this case, I think it'd be an easy no-brainer if he wants to join the team and add it in, and then he'd stick around and help us solve those crazy edge cases like we've been talking about in other discussions today for bug fixes.
I'll tell you what then. Why don't I reach out on the discussion and ask him just that question if he's not here in the chat, and bring the answer back at the next meetup.
Cool. We should probably ask, is anybody opposed to adding Radiant View plugin? One point I did want to mention was, speaking of George and the amazing avatar view, George has showed how to use avatar view as to show 5-star ratings in the sample app, but it's definitely not to this level. It's not tappable, and you'd have to add all that manually. So I think this is an improvement, but want to make sure there's no objections to this. Does anybody just hate rating controls? Has anybody looked at the code and said the code's terrible?
Yeah,
okay, cool.
I can also add that there is already a control for camera view, but we are still we still have a plans and open PRs for adding a camera view directly to the MAUI community toolkit. So it's probably not a big. So for rating control for this library, it's a good improvement, a next step to make it even more popular and get an official support from us, and make it official control, more official and more trustable.
But then we have to maintain it.
Yeah.
So more work.
We just bring more people onto the team next year, and then they'll maintain it. Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah. So that would be cool. I'm definitely with you, Brandon. If there's already NuGet, we can't absorb all the NuGets into our thing, right? That's not healthy for the ecosystem as well. But for some, definitely, we've mentioned that a couple of times already. Hey, if you have some cool thing, we definitely love to take it in as well. And share the burden a little bit of maintaining it. And, if we could have this person also join the team, that would be ideal, right? They have this area to own, maybe they want to do some other stuff. So we have a plan forward here. Yes, the 2 discussions with question marks. Let me really quickly talk about those. Shell routing attribute, super cool. I think that's a cool idea. You want to do routes and
Gerald, I'm going to jump in. Your audio's gotten weird. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm picking up every other word. But I'll say I added these to the agenda. These might have been discussions we already discussed, but they had the needs discussion tag on them, which is why I added them in. So
Yeah, they were the other ones that had they broke the threshold of being discussed
okay.
on the next stand up. So that's why I added the tags earlier today. But if they've already been discussed and turned down, then we can close them and move on.
I actually remember. So this first one, shell routing. I'm pretty sure
Quite
we
old.
did greenlight it. I remember talking about it. I remember us being excited about it. Holy cow, VJ's done a ton of work down here.
It's quite an old one, but I couldn't find anywhere where it's actually been sort of brought in, worked on. I couldn't find an issue. I had a little kind of dig around, but yeah.
You know, that's a good a good point, Cliff. You know, if we have talked about it, it's probably best we add the approved label if we've all.
Yes, I remember. Sorry for interrupting. I remember that we were talking about this proposal in our previous meeting, and I also wanted to contribute to this proposal, so I can try to make it.
Sold.
Yeah.
And just before we before I steamroll anybody, we did already talk about this and we were all on board with it, right? Was there any negatives or was there anybody saying no, we shouldn't do this?
I don't remember any objections.
Cool. I mean, I know selfishly I would love this. So, Tanya, thank you.
Probably we can remove needs discussion label as well, as we
Yes.
already discussed.
There we go. So yeah, Tanya, the next step would be to put it into a proposal. So go into saying new issue, then new feature proposal. And this is where you just get real in depth into like the detailed design, which it looks like VJ's already done a bunch of work down here. So probably a lot of this could be copy pasted on how we're going to implement it. And the thought in this new feature proposal, Donnie, is just so we can kind of see the high level API design and chat about it a bit, like we were doing earlier with the pop-up service. So you don't have to write all the code first, and then we look at the code and go, we really shouldn't have designed it that way, and then rewrite all the code. So yeah, I'd say, Donnie, thank you. And go ahead and open up that new feature proposal and we'll get it started. Probably even tag VJ in it. I didn't realize so much work had already been done on this.
And also, I think it might be need to be updated to the .NET 8 because it was opened last year, and maybe some changes is required to this stuff.
Good point. And I also see it's using, or VJ's recommendation here is source generators. Those can be tricky. I have a little bit of experience with them, so happy to help you out there, Tanya. I wouldn't call myself an expert. Pedro also has a lot of experience with source generators, although he probably wouldn't call himself an expert either, but happy to help stumble through it together with you as you try to do these source generator things.
Yeah, I know it can be tricky. I tried several times to write some my own source generator, so thanks for advice.
Perfect. So I don't know if my audio is any better. If not, let me know.
Much better.
Just keep talking. Oh, thank you. So the other one, I think okay, this is maybe then another one in kind of like Cliff's algorithm that came up. Yeah, this also has 18 upvotes. See, I'm popular. But this is just, I put this out there for yes, this is a proposal. Yes, we definitely want to add this, but it kind of seems impossible. I think his name was James Neor Matrix in the chat right here. He has done a very courageous attempt on adding that. But yeah, so I need to figure out good method for dealing with other controls on the page. For Windows, you have this new full window and not really full screen. So, all problems there. And on iOS, it behaves weirdly. We talked about this in a couple of other streams as well. So, while I would love to have it, there does not seem to be a great solution for all the things. So, yeah. that's kind of like where the status is on this one. So then markup time. We also have some stuff for the markup. Brandon, PRs, add nested complex bindings to docs. That sounds complex.
Yeah, we'll stay quick. This was actually a new documentation. Let's see if I can jump to the docs real quick. So, long story short, somebody opened up an issue on the markup repo recently about they had a complex, or what I call nested binding, where you're referencing, in this case, not a view model's property, but a view model's properties property. And the issue was that it didn't work, but in reality, I just never documented it. I kind of didn't document it on purpose because I didn't want people to use it because it's not pretty. but yeah, after they opened the issue and I was able to leverage their example, I figured this is the time. But so just PSA to anybody who's doing their bindings in C# like me, and you have a binding that you want to point to an object inside of an object and then your property in the view model, you totally can do it, but type bindings are just a little weird. You have to essentially let the binding engine know all of the layers you're touching. So you have to let it know that pass in the name of the class and the property inside that class that you're nesting to. And we do that here in this handler's parameter. So it doesn't look pretty. And if I'm being honest, I go out of my way to not do this. Like, I'll just create another property in my view model that maybe points to this property instead so that I don't have to do this in my bindings. But it's totally doable, and just wanted to share this as more of an announcement with everybody that, yep, here it is. And we've updated the docs, and sorry, sorry I didn't do that a long time ago. And on that same note with type,
keep talking.
On the same note with type bindings, there's another issue opened up. Hey, VJ's back again. Shout out to VJ. Good to see you. He said that it's not working as expected, and this is part thought experiment, part user error. But long story short, let's see. VJ wanted to do a two-way binding. So he said the binding mode is going to be two ways. He's pointing to this property in his view model, which, great, that should work. But in reality, with type bindings, you have to pass in a setter. So you have to tell the binding how to apply that new value. So it's a little redundant. So because you're pointing to that property already, and we could probably assume that if you are going to set it, that this is the default setter. So I shared this with VJ, and we kind of went down this rabbit hole of like, how could we maybe do this automatically? So if anybody has any thoughts, come join the conversation. Let me share this in our chat. Two-way typed bindings. Because if you have ideas on how to do it, it's not implemented by default. So I agree with VJ. It's not necessarily intuitive, and we could probably do it better, but also type bindings are hard. I spent a lot of time implementing these about a year ago when I first did it. So come join the fun. If anybody has any ideas, come open up a proposal, open up a pull request. Last one on the MAUI markup repo from C# fans. This is a discussion that we could maybe approve here, where somebody had the idea of basically making it easier to use visual states. Like, this is the way you have to implement visual states in C#, which, by the way, Gerald, feel free to pass this on to the .NET MAUI team. This has always been just a miserable experience in C# for us C# developers when it comes to visual state managers. Yeah. And I've similarly gone out of my way to avoid this because it is so painful just to pass in one setter. You have this whole crazy nested stuff. So I love this idea. Basically, this would simplify it down to saying just add, you pass in your visual state groups, your visual state with your type for selected, boom, 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 2 lines, 3 lines of code instead of all of this. So was kind of hoping we could approve this discussion and we could nudge him to open up a proposal, but want to see what everybody else thought.
I don't use it, but it looks better to me.
Just a small question. Visual state type selected here is just some constant, or it's like a string where we pass a visual state? Yeah, this one.
Good question.
I see we pass it like a name as a string.
Yeah, so it looks like under the hood, that API takes in a string. So yeah, good question. I'm not sure if he wants to create an enum. I certainly like the enum method better, but if it's a string under the hood, that could be a bit of a maintenance nightmare where we'll have to keep that up to date. So
I think it kind of has to be. Well, you can probably have some kind of both, but I think it has to be a string because you can also define like your own visual states. So it can be anything.
Okay. I mean, that could be as simple as just changing this from an enum to a string. So
Yeah.
anybody against approving? We don't necessarily need to vote for discussions, but I think this is a great implementation, and I would love to see it because I hate using visual states in C#. All right, cool. We'll mark it approved, and I'll follow up. And that's it for the agenda.
Perfect. Yeah, my machine is kind of like getting slow, so maybe that was the source of my sound problems as well. Great. So we're a little bit over time, but we got through the whole agenda. Lots of super valuable stuff here, and that is the last for this 2023 for this year. Be on the lookout for that last release. We're going to scrape together some PRs, go with that, do a last release, I think, in time for this year. And we're going to be back next year with this same concept. First Thursday of every month, we're going to have the stand-up. You control our work to some extent. Now, like, Community Toolkit, we're all in this together, right? So we're doing this for you, and I think this has been a great ride for 2023 and all together. And I'm looking forward to what we can do in 2024 based on .NET 8. Then, of course, during 2024, we're going to see .NET 9. So lots of exciting stuff going on there. Thank you all so much for joining. Be in touch in chats, Discords, all kinds of things. And we'll see you on the other side.